Let's continue. Let's continue on page 279 here at the top of page 279, in which we speak again about this lowest category of the complete Rasha versus, again, the complete Tzaddik. And as we just said, as the Rasha has still some soul left in him, even though he might be a complete Rasha, completely wicked, while the Tzaddik has completely eradicated the bad in him. Let's continue. There are two ways of affecting the animal soul. Does anyone want to read? Anyone?
I'll read if nobody else wants to.
Please, Margot, go for it.
Okay. There are two ways of affecting the animal soul. The first is to push it into a corner. This is what the tzaddik to whom is evil does. He still has some evil within him, but he has suppressed it so that he can no longer assert itself or exert any influence over the body. The other way is to turn it around so that it no longer functions as an animal soul, but as a godly soul. The latter is the level of the tzaddik to whom is only good, in whom no evil remains, for it has been entirely transformed into good.
Right. Let me just stop you there, because now we're going back to the complete tzaddik, right? And how he has conquered his animal soul with his godly soul. It's just interesting because that is really a recurring theme in the entire book of the Tanya, that negative qualities are not necessarily negative, because it depends how you channel them. So yes, there are two ways to fight them. You can suppress them, but if they're not necessarily negative, why suppress them? Channel them for the good instead. Now, you're not always equipped to channel them for the good, and sometimes the only way to deal with them is to suppress them, to push them aside. But if you can be equipped, and if you can have the wisdom to know how to, then channel those negative qualities for the good. And by the way, this is very much connected to the portion we just read yesterday, because it's fascinating that Isaac and Rebekah, who had two children, Jacob and Esau, had two separate favorites, so to speak. The favorite of Rebekah was Jacob, because he was a complete a dweller of the tent, as it says. Ish tav tam yoshev alim. He studied Torah all day long. It's easy to love a child like that. Yitzchak, on the other hand, he loved Esau, the child who was maybe rebellious, the child who was a hunter. Not only that, but it says in the verse that Isaac loved Esau kitzayid befiv, because he had hunting in his mouth, because he was a hunter. Is that a reason really to love a child because he's a hunter? You, Isaac, you are compared to an angel, you love hunters? I mean, it doesn't make sense. What is the Torah saying here? But for that, we have to understand who Isaac was. Isaac was a well digger. That's what he did. He dug wells. Anyone who digs wells knows that when you see the earth, you really are not just seeing soil or dust. What you're seeing is untapped fountains. That's what you're seeing. You have to dig through the dust and through the earth and through the soil in order to find that fountain. But a real tzaddik like Yitzchak sees the fountains within the earth. And this is exactly what this is saying, and it's very much connected to what you just read. And that is that Yitzchak knew the potential that Esau had. He didn't just see a hunter. He saw the energy of the hunter. He saw that incredible passion that a hunter has. And therefore, he loved him so much, because he knew that if that energy could be channeled for the good, Esau could surpass Jacob and could maybe even surpass him. That's why he loved him. And that's really the ultimate tzaddik. Yitzchak, who was a complete tzaddik, understood that we can't just suppress evil, we have to channel it. And if Esau is able to channel it, then he'll reach the highest of highs. But that's the idea, and it's true for our personal lives too. Think about it. If you have a trait that you don't like in yourself, instead of beating yourself down, which you should never do, and suppressing that trait and saying, oh, it's a bad trait, I'm going to push it aside, why don't you think of ways you can transform it? Like I just read this in a book of Chassidus yesterday. If you're angry, then be angry against your evil inclination, against your Yetzer Hara. That's a good way to use anger. For it's not necessarily bad. The Talmud says, we've spoken about this, Talmud says that if you are born in the muzzle under the constellation of blood, which means that you might have an inclination to murder, then become a slaughterer, be a shochet of cows, of kosher, of animals, to make them kosher, or be a moel, be a circumciser, but use that quality again for the good. So this is exactly what this is saying, that a complete tzaddik understands how to not only suppress the evil, but also to channel it, which is the ideal way of dealing with evil that every one of us should try and engage in. But let's continue. Sorry to stop you there, Margot. In contrast,
a complete tzaddik could also be wrong.
Sorry?
A complete tzaddik could also be wrong.
Could be wrong? In what way? Explain.
Maybe Esau had such negative qualities
that
he didn't want to recognize how evil he could be.
Right. Esav himself didn't recognize, and that's the problem also very often, that many ways, I mean, we can really dwell on Esav because it has so much to teach us about what we're speaking about. And that is that, you see, Esav, I believe that part of the problem was that Esav was defined as a hunter. It's interesting because Isaac, if we go deeper into the verse, Isaac didn't love Esav because he was a hunter. He, as I said, the translation is not because he was a hunter, but because he spoke about hunting. Kitzayit befiv, was a hunter in his mouth. Yet when we look at Esav in the Midrash, and until these very days, until commentaries that speak about Esav today, everyone says he was a hunter. In many ways, defining him as a hunter may have been his downfall. He saw himself as a hunter, and therefore he might have said to himself, "Oh, I have no, there's no way I can come out of this definition that was self-imposed or that was imposed by others." So he didn't believe in himself as Isaac believed in him. And because he didn't believe in himself as Isaac believed in him, he remained a hunter. And that's quite a lesson for life altogether. That sometimes we fall prey to these definitions that are either self-made or other-made. And we say to ourselves, "Oh, nothing will come out of me because I'm so-and-so." And we lose faith in ourselves. And then we live that type of life. While the Isaacs of life really see us as so much more than those definitions. They believe in the deepest potential that we have. They have much more faith in us than we have in ourselves. And in order to come out of our Esav mode, so to speak, we have to look not at the way we look at ourselves, but we have to look at the way others, the Isaacs, look at us. Maybe that can rescue us from those definitions. That's an important point. So he wasn't a hunter. Torah never says that he was a hunter. It says that he was hunting, yes, he hunted, but it doesn't say that he was a hunter. That wasn't his definition. He had hunting in his mouth, yes, but he wasn't a hunter. We box him, unfortunately, or maybe he boxed himself. I don't know. Maybe he called himself a hunter. I don't know. But the Torah doesn't call him a hunter because the Torah sees the potential of a person. Even though you might define yourself as a hunter, you're so much more than that. And that has a lot to do with what we're saying, that the only way really to channel our negative qualities is to, first and foremost, not allow ourselves to be defined by them. Because if we are defined by negative qualities, then that's who we are. And that's who that's how we live. But to say to ourselves, okay, maybe others are calling me a hunter, but I'm really not a hunter. I have the energy of a hunter, I have the passion of a hunter, but I'm not a hunter. And therefore I'll use the energy of a hunter, the passion of a hunter for good things. That's when redemption can begin. But that's the idea. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I've said this before also, but in Hebrew, there is no translation for the word am. In English, to define ourselves, we say, I am. I am a lawyer, I am a doctor, I am a rabbi, I am whatever, am. There is no translation, there is no word for the word am in Hebrew. You say ani, which means I. It doesn't say, if you want to say I'm a doctor, you say ani rofe, ani rav. You don't say ani this. Why? Because am, if you think about it in English, and maybe there's some wordsmiths here, but if you think about it, am is a word that seeks to box, to define. And Judaism doesn't believe in definitions, in labels. And therefore, it raises the word am from its language. You might act as a doctor, fine, but you are not a doctor. You're much more than that. You might act as a rabbi, you might act as a lawyer, you might act as a nurse, whatever it may be, but it's not you. It's what you may be doing, but you're much more than that. And same for negative definitions. You're a hunter? No, there's no am. You might have hunting in your life. You might be engaging in hunting in your life. You might have the passion of a hunter. You're not a hunter. You're much more than that. You're a soul. The only thing that we can really say about people is that they are souls. That is maybe the most accurate definition. They're divine. Every one of us has a soul. And when we speak of souls, there is really no limit to souls. When we speak of souls, we also know that every soul has its own mission. So for some, it's healing, and therefore they engage in becoming doctors. Or for others, it's other things. But again, there's so much more to the soul than there is to any other type of definition. And therefore, the only definition we can really give is, I am a soul. But that's about it. And that has a lot to do with the way that tzaddik views himself. And maybe that's why, but part of the reason why a tzaddik becomes a tzaddik, because he refuses to fall into any box. You know, it's interesting because in education, you see that. And I don't mean to bore you with, we can continue on, and please feel free to share your comments too. But it's specifically, and I see that all the time, I teach part-time, but it's specifically the children who don't necessarily follow the rules. It's specifically the children who are what we call troublemakers. It's those children who, if they know how to channel their qualities in the right way, they become the greatest leaders.
When you keep saying hunter, I can't help think about Biden's son.
Right.
Let's not get political.
Let's not get political. And that's a name and not a definition. Right.
Rabbi,
You good point.
I have a question.
Yes, please, Erica.
So from what I'm understanding, it's saying like the Rasha has evil, but still has the tzaddik in him, still has the godly soul.
Right.
But then when you're talking about the tzaddik, he has completely eradicated any evil from him.
That's right.
So is that meaning that as souls we're inherently good, not evil, and evil is more kind of like, because what I'm seeing is like a tzaddik can be more like a noun. The good that we're doing is a noun to be defined by. Then the evil is more defined like a verb, almost like a tikkun, to channel energy to become better, if we can acknowledge it and then eradicate it. Am I understanding that correctly?
No, that's well said. That's very well said. Yes. First, we are born inherently good, right? There is no evil baby on the planet. We're born inherently good. The question is if we can maintain that goodness and then cultivate that goodness. Because eventually we have to face our animal soul. And animal soul is only strengthened with age and with life altogether, with challenges. So the tzaddik is able to harness his animal soul for the good, as we're saying. And therefore, he's able to also eradicate any iota of evil in his animal soul, used it for the good. While the Rasha becomes almost a slave to his animal soul. Animal soul completely overtakes him. Now, it doesn't mean that he's hopeless, because again, there's still some soul. So the soul is a noun, you're right, the evil is more of a verb that we have to deal with all the time. Well said. But again, I think the greater the evil, the more potential. If you think about it that way, right? Because imagine using all of that for good. There's a great story about Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, who once saw someone. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev was known as the advocate of Israel. He always used to judge people favorably and love people unconditionally, truly love them unconditionally. And one day he saw someone who was known as not the best person in the world. and he says to him, I'm jealous of you. Man says, you jealous of me? I sin all the time. Why are you jealous of me? He says, I'm jealous of you because it says in the Talmud that when you do teshuvah, when you repent, all of your sins are turned into merits. You have so many sins, but when you're going to do teshuvah, you're going to have so many merits. You're going to surpass me by far. The man says to Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, well, come back next year and you'll be even more jealous of me. But in the end, the words of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak penetrated him, and he did teshuvah, and he transformed his sins into merits. Now, what does it mean to transform your sins into merits? It means that you've harnessed them and the potential and their energy and their force for good. That's what I'm saying. The troublemaker child, so-called troublemaker child, is really so much more potential than the goody-goody in the class. He just doesn't know how to use it yet. And therefore, it's creating a lot of issues. Rabbi Steinsaltz himself was a troublemaker child. He told me that. And he said that at one point, he had to have an agreement with his teacher. And the agreement was, teacher, you don't bother me, I don't bother you. But look, he became Rabbi Steinsaltz. So it's again harnessing all of that energy for the good. So you can even say potentially the complete tzaddik, the one who becomes a complete tzaddik, maybe had a greater force of evil within him. He just knew how to channel it. The Talmud says that in the Tractate of Sukkah. It's quite an astounding line if you think about it. But it says as follows: Kol hagadol mechavero yitzro gadol himeno. That whoever is greater than his fellow, then his evil inclination is also greater. Now, how could you say that? Well, this explains how you can say this. Because if you are greater, that means you have greater force within you, both forces of good and forces of evil. Now, if you're the greatest, you know how to channel that great force of evil within you for the good. But that's really what the Talmud says. Did someone want to say something? I think I heard something.
Yes, sorry,
yeah.
yes. What is the direct translation of evil that we're discussing right now in Hebrew?
So the evil that we're speaking about here is really translated by the Tanya as the animal soul. Which is interesting because he doesn't necessarily call it evil. He calls it the animal soul, just like animals. Animals have a lot of force, but you have to know how to train them. If you know how to train them, they could be, they could become servants of good, just like animals. So that's really the translation by the Tanya. We each have an animal soul that needs a lot of grooming, and that needs to be controlled, needs to be channeled. That's the translation of the Tanya. Evil in general, in Hebrew, is an interesting word because we speak of the word ra in Hebrew. We say yetzer hara, for example, the evil inclination. But the word ra also has, and we mentioned this many months ago, but the word ra also has another meaning. It's interesting. Because the word ra, if you just leave the word as it is, resh ayin, and you just change the vowels, you can spell the word rea, which means friend. Rea. Because again, if you know how to harness the potential of evil, evil can become your friend. That energy, that passion, well channeled, now helps you do good. So it becomes a friend. Unfortunately, if not, then evil is evil, and evil can do a lot of damage. And evil can sometimes be the opposite of a friend, be a true enemy. And therefore, if it loses its control, then maybe it has to be suppressed or even eradicated. But a complete tzaddik knows how to use evil as a friend. Yeah.
Does the transformation to good come mainly from within yourself? Or does it have to come from like others or from God, or how does that work?
So you know the story about this monk that I just reminded of the story. I think I heard it from you, William. Could it be But this monk who was in New York City, and he goes and he buys himself a hot dog, say, and the guy says a hot dog is $3.50. So he takes a $5 bill and he gives it to the man. I remember monks can't speak, and he's just waiting there for his change. And the guy who's selling his hot dog says, "What do you want?" He says, "Change." And the guy selling the hot dog says, "Oh, you want change? Change has to come from within." But the point is that a transformation of good can, in a person, can only happen by the person.
Within.
And really, change has to come from within. The teachers can guide us, and challenges of life sometimes also form us and shape us. But eventually, we have to change ourselves. No one else can do that.
I'm not taking any credit for that one.
No? Okay.
It's a good line, though.
That's a good line. Okay. All right, let's continue a little bit more, and please feel free to speak your minds.
Okay. In contrast, the Rasha can repress his godly soul, reducing it to a state of subordination to the animal soul. But he cannot annihilate it entirely, as the Tzaddik can do with his animal soul.
Right. So we're speaking about channeling evil, but the Rasha sometimes is simply not equipped to channel evil. Evil is too overwhelming for him, or the force of evil or the allure of evil sometimes is too overwhelming for Rasha. So you can't tell the Rasha dissect evil, take the energy, leave the action, and harness the energy and channel it so that you can use it for the good. He's not there yet. It's way too overwhelming. So what can he do? As a first step, he needs to suppress evil. He needs to say, okay, evil, I'm staying far, far away from you. I'm not interacting with you whatsoever. When I mature, then I'll come back to you, and then I'll use you for the good. But that's how the Rasha needs to deal with the evil. That's how most people need to deal with the evil as a first step. And it's true regarding, think about it in the way of emotions. Sometimes you're so upset about something, or you're so angry about something, or you're so sad about something that you can't deal with that something that made you upset. So what do? You put it away. You lock it up in a drawer. And you say, okay, I'm not going to deal with it right now. I have to build myself. When I mature, when I'm a little calmer, that's when I'll come back to it and I'll learn from it. I heard this from Elie Wiesel, the famed Holocaust survivor of blessed memory, was truly a shining light in our world, and we miss him, especially in times like these. But Elie Wiesel said to a friend of mine who was his devout student, Chaim Ben Amu, in Miami, he said to him, look, what you have to, because Chaim Ben Amu is a writer, and he was asking Elie Wiesel for some writing advice. He said, look, what you have to do with your writing is, before you publish it, before you even decide if you like what you wrote, or you didn't decide, or you didn't like what you wrote, is that you take your manuscript as soon as you write it, and you put it in your drawer, and you don't think about it, and you don't even go back to it for at least 3 days. After 3 days, take it out, reread it, and you might find that it's a good piece, or you might find that it's a terrible piece, and then you have to tear it up and throw it in the garbage. Mm. And Chaim Ben Amu tells me it's the best advice that he's received as a writer, because it's so true. Sometimes we're so close to the thing itself that we don't have the ability to judge the thing itself, and certainly not to grow from the thing itself. So what do? We suppress it. We put it away. Only after we've matured and we've regained our senses, so to speak, then we can go back and learn from it. And same with evil. That's how the Rasha needs to deal with the evil.